All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll be talking about creating SaaS content packs for Power BI. My name is Yusuf Shukri. I'm a program manager on the Power BI team, and I manage the content packs program, the SaaS content packs program. So I'll be the one to reach out to if you are interested in building a content pack for your service. If you have a SaaS application and you'd like to build a content pack for your service. So the things we'll cover today is what are SaaS content packs. Most probably you already know what they are. We're going to go quickly over the scenario, how to use them. And then we're going to go over why would you build a content pack, a SaaS content pack? What are the benefits of doing that? And also, what are the requirements to build one? What does your service needs to have for you to be able to successfully build a SaaS content pack? And then we're going to do a demo on how you can build and test a content pack. We're going to go through the end-to-end process from starting with your service all the way to having your content pack in PowerBI.com available for your users to use. And then finally, we'll cover the process for you reaching out to us to submit it and certify it, sign an agreement with us, and eventually have it visible publicly in the product. So SaaS content packs are a set of out-of-box content that you design, reports, dashboards, queries that calls your API to bring the data to Power BI, data model you build on top of this data you retrieve from your API, where you can define your relationships, your measures, calculations, custom fields, and reports and dashboards you build on top of that data model. All of this is templatized and becomes available for your users to download from Power BI. Your end user will just need to find your content pack, connect to the service, log in with their credentials to your service, to your API. If your content pack is designed to accept parameters, then the user will be asked to enter those parameters. And then within minutes, they have an interactive, rich report and dashboard to use that shows them analytics on top of the data that you have in your SaaS application. This data that is retrieved to Power BI, it's cached, and it's refreshed on a daily basis. So once they download the content pack for the first time, every morning they come and the data is up to date. They can schedule this refresh to the cadence of this refresh can be changed to multiple times a day, but the default out of the box is once a day. So how to find it? You're probably familiar with that. If you go to get data in Power BI, what we mean by a SaaS content pack is the content packs available under the services tile in this page. When you click on that, you see this gallery of third-party SaaS content packs available for you to use. We have around 100, a little bit over 100 today. And we have a program we're going to be talking about today that allows you to add your content pack to this list. So I'm going to go.
No worries, I didn't put your resolution.
OK. So I'm going to go over how you can create a content pack.
Resolution.
I'm going to.
Just need to change 90, 20, 1080.
OK, so technical difficulties. So the content pack, the reason you build, some of the reasons you build a content pack for users is how easy it is for you to build and for your end users to use. We're going to go over how you, if you have an API, a REST API, or an OData feed, you can easily build a content pack on top of this API available for your users. And for your end users has to click a couple of buttons in order to download that content pack. OK, so I'm going to show you one of the most recent. Is it
going to work?
Yeah, that would work. OK. So this is the get data page in the product. As I showed, if you click on the services, you'll see this list of content packs. I'm going to look for the Office 365 content pack, which is one of our recent content packs that we added.
Yeah. Sorry.
I can duplicate. How about that?
Yes, we're live now.
OK. Perfect. OK, so now we're live. This is the get data page. You click on services. You'll see the gallery of the content packs. you find the content pack you would like to create. So in this case, I will choose the Office 365 Adoption Preview Content Pack. This is our most recent content pack, and it shows you the adoption data for your Office 365 tenant. This content pack is designed to accept a parameter. So when I click on Get It Now, I'm asked to enter my tenant ID. I put in my tenant ID, and then the next step will be to authenticate. In this case, this content pack uses OAuth 2.0 for authentication. So I authenticate against the service. And then the next step will be to create the content pack. We also have the ability to validate the parameter you enter. So in this case, if I entered a malformatted parameter, I get a validation error that says the tenant ID you provided is not in the correct format. This is a new addition to the content pack infrastructure that reduces significantly the amount of user errors while creating a content pack. Let's say I put my correct tenant ID. I log in. I wait a few minutes, and then I see this rich dashboard ready for me to explore my Office 365 adoption data. So as an end user, all I did is I clicked a couple buttons. I entered my tenant ID. I logged in with my admin account, Office 365 admin account, and I get this rich dashboard to start exploring my data. If I click on any of these tiles, I'll see this. I'll drill into the report that is contained in this content pack. In this case, it's a really rich report that shows me all my adoption data over all Office 365 products. I can interact with it. I can slice and dice the data any way I want. And this is just a starting point. So you offered this to your users, this template, this report, as a starting point for them to customize and build their own reports on top of the data that you include in the content pack. So if I can click Edit Report, I can add filters, I can add more visuals, I can build brand new report pages, or even build a new report on top of the data set. What the user cannot change is the data model, the underlying data model that this content pack is built on. So they cannot call make more API endpoints that you have not included in your data set. They cannot build more fields or tables. The data model that you included, the schema of the data that you included, is it's the one thing that they cannot customize inside the content pack. The report itself, the dashboard, is fully customizable to design it the way that fit their needs. OK, so like we already mentioned, it's very easy for you to build and for your user to use. It's focused on a scenario. So you can build multiple content packs that offers your users multiple scenarios or use cases. You can build one that's focused on sales management or customer service or marketing scenarios. So you can customize your report and your dashboard to serve a certain use case. And like I mentioned, your end user can customize this further. So you just give them the starting point, and then it's fully customizable. They can build their own reports and dashboards on top of that. And also you can build on top of the data. When you design your data model, you call your API to retrieve the data. You can build calculations, measures, and enrich this data in Power BI to include in your template before you release it. So you have the ability to enrich your data set with the rich capabilities of Power BI. You can do DAX calculations on top of it, formulas, relationships, and include it in the content pack. OK, so what are the requirements? What do you need to have to be able to add your content pack to the list of content packs we have available? One, a public software as a service application. So we do not support on-premise applications. So you need to have a service. And you need to own that service, because when you reach out to us, we will sign an agreement with you that allow us to have your content pack in the product, your branding, your product name. So you cannot build a content pack for another service that you do not own unless you have a relationship with that service. You are a consultant that we're working with them, and you will broker the agreement signing with that service. The service needs a public developer API. And by public, it's accessible via the internet. So this API can be a REST API, it can be an OData feed, it can have any authentication type, or the most popular authentication types like basic authentication, OAuth 2.0, API key, but there has to be a developer API. We do not support today things like webhooks. We do not support direct query, if you're familiar with it. We do not support accessing the database directly, even if it was a cloud database. An API is a necessary part to be able to successfully create a content pack. So the question is, no live data connections like analysis services? No, the answer is no. So you cannot, yes, not today. So you cannot use direct query, you cannot use analysis services as a service, or on-premise, of course, or you cannot even, if you have an API that is in the form of webhooks, also that is not supported today. It needs to be a transaction REST API where you make a query, you get the data back, and you visualize this data. And of course, a scenario that makes sense. So the scenario that you need to have data that is suitable to be visualized in Power BI, and the business scenario is meaningful for the content pack. Yep. That's a great question. So the question is, what's meant by fixed schema? So fixed schema is basically something that the data model you will build inside the content pack need to be common across all your users. So if your data is heavily customized, or if your data is unstructured, then the content pack scenario is not really feasible. Basically, you build a template of, if you will, tables, columns, fields that every single user who will download this content pack will have. And if that's not common across users, then the content pack scenario is not really feasible in this case. So we get a lot of requests from partners who have services that carry unstructured data, files, or heavily customized data where really most of the columns are user-defined. This is not feasible for building a SaaS content pack as it stands today. Does this answer your question? All right, so I do meet the requirements. What are the steps for building a SaaS content pack? So this might look a little bit complicated, but I'm going to go over it really quickly. So I have a SaaS application, and I meet the requests. The first question I need to ask, and I meet the requirements, which fundamentally having an API that you can use to get the data. The first question to ask is does my API support basic authentication? This is an important question because it will determine whether you will need to build a data connector to connect to your API, or just use Power BI Desktop out of the box. So Power BI Desktop is the authoring tool for content packs, for SaaS content packs. That's where you're going to build all your queries, your data model, your report before you convert it to a content pack. But you need to be able to access your API to be successful at doing that. And Power BI out of the box only supports basic authentication as the authentication type. So if the answer is yes, then you proceed to Power BI Desktop right away. You connect to your API. You use the out-of-the-box available basic authentication to connect to it. You build your content. You build your queries that connects to the data and loads the data to the model. You build your model where you can customize your fields. You can build calculations, relationships. Then you build your report. And finally, you upload that to powerbi.com to convert it to a content pack, and we'll see how to do that. But if the answer is no, and your API, like most APIs, does not support basic authentication, but supports things like OAuth 2.0 or Web API key or any other, I would say those are the most two common API authentication mechanisms. If you have another custom authentication flow, then you'll probably need to reach out to us, and we can discuss whether it's feasible or not. So I can't really make a statement whether it's we only support those because we have a level of flexibility where we can support other types. But most commonly, OAuth 2.0 and API key are readily supported by data connectors. So if you don't have basic authentication and have OAuth 2.0 or API key authentication, then you'll need to build data connector. And we'll go over that a little bit, but I'm not going to go into it a lot. There was a session earlier today about data connectors. So if you haven't attended that, you can look it up online after. I think all the sessions will be available in 2 weeks after the conference. And we'll provide also the link to the documentation on how to build data connectors. So once you've done that and you built your Power BI desktop file that has your queries, your reports, your data model, you upload that to powerbi.com and create the dashboard, which is the last remaining artifact that you haven't built yet. So the content pack contains a dashboard, one report that has multiple pages, your queries, and your data model definition. And in powerbi.com, once you created your dashboard, the next steps is converted that to a content pack. And we'll do a demo of that, but basically you create a content pack in the settings in Power BI. You choose to create a content pack. You choose to create this content pack as a template content pack, which is an option available for you, and test that end to end. If you have a data connector, if you have built a data connector, you will not be able to test your content pack in the service until you submit the data connector to us, and we'll deploy it for you in the service. And we'll get to the submission process in a little bit. If you don't use a data connector, then before even reaching out to us, you can build your own content pack in the service and test it end to end. And once it's ready, then you can reach out and submit it to us. And we'll see how to do that in a little bit. So quickly, data connectors are written in the M language. It allows you to access data from various sources from Power BI Desktop. For the content pack, you will likely need it specifically if your API, like I mentioned, uses an authentication other than basic auth. There are some other scenarios where you might still need to write a data connector, even if your API supports basic auth. I'm not going to go into this because these are very small corner cases. So for example, if your API expects a post request with content in the body of the call, then you might need to actually write a data connector for that. So if you have basic authentication, you try Power BI Desktop to connect to your API, and that doesn't work, reach out to us, and we'll have the contacts at the end of the session, and we'll work with you on deciding whether you need to write a data connector or not. And the data connector will need to be published to the service for your content pack to work. So as part of your submission, the artifacts of the content pack to us, you will have to submit that. And that you will need to do that prior to you testing the content pack on your own. Here's the link to more documentations and the SDK on how to build it. There's a Visual Studio plugin that allows you to easily build connectors and a lot of documentation. And there is the session that Matt had this morning. You can download it online, and it will help you through the process. So I'm going to switch now to just quickly show you how to build a content pack. And I have two flavors of the content pack, one that uses a data connector and one that does not. And we'll go through, depending on your service, how you go about building an end-to-end content pack scenario. So I'm going to still use the Office 365 content pack, since this is the one I demoed, and this is our most recent one, and it's a super rich content pack that can very easily be built with the tools that you have available today. So this is the Office 365 Power BI desktop file that was created, that the content pack was created from. And this version of the file does not use a connector, because Office 365 has an OData feed that is publicly accessible. In this case, it does not use basic authentication, but it uses OAuth. But because it's a first-party service, Power BI Desktop out of the box do support. But in your case, if this is possible, then it will be because you have basic authentication. So in this case, all I've done to build this file, I started from the get data, OData feed. I put my OData feed URL. I connect to the API. I see all the endpoints available for me in that OData feed. I pick the endpoint that I'm interested in, and I can do this multiple times to build multiple queries. And I click Edit. And now I have the data. This is the starting point. all I've done is just connect it to my OData feed and retrieve the data to Power BI. You can build all the transformations you're familiar with. You can make this, you can transform the data into any shape you want before you load it to the data model. And here are all the queries that were built in this content pack to access all the Office 365 products endpoints. And if we look at, basically, it's a simple odata.feed call, which is the out-of-box OData function that's available in Power BI. So really, all I've done to build all these tables is just to create multiple queries that connect to the OData endpoint and pick the different tables I would like to load. And once I'm done with that, close and apply. Now it's connecting to the API, retrieving the data, the full set of the data, and loading it into my data model. So for now, I've got to cancel that. Once I've done that, I can build my own calculations and enrich this data that was loaded to the data model. So there are a bunch of calculated fields that you see here. There are relationships I defined between those tables to make this work make this richer and work in the way I want. And then finally, once I have the data model in the shape I want, I built my report. And this is a 24-page report this is where you're going to spend most of the time of your authoring of the content pack time, is building this report, making it as rich as you need it to be to serve your scenario. And like I said, you can have multiple content packs that serve multiple use cases or multiple scenarios. All right, so now I have a file. It looks exactly the way I want it, and I would like to convert that to a content pack. So the first step is I will publish this to Power BI. Let's say save and apply later, and upload this to my Power BI account. So I've already done that. So I'm going to switch now to Power BI, go to my workspace. See that I have content pack demo. I uploaded the data set, I uploaded the report, and that created the Power BI desktop file, and that created a report and a data set for me. The next step is to build a dashboard in Power BI and open the report, pin whatever visuals I'd like to include in my template content pack into that dashboard. Once I've done that, now I'm ready to convert this to a content pack and test it. At this point, you will only be able to do this unless if you did not use a data connector in your content pack, or after you have submitted the data connector to us. So in this case, I don't have a data connector, so I am free to go and convert that to a content pack. In the settings menu, I click Create Content Pack. It will open this Create Content Pack page. What we're doing here is we're creating an organization content pack. We are not creating a SaaS content pack yet. But you have the option to create the organization content pack as a template. So there is this checkbox at the bottom that says Make this content pack template. I pick my dashboard, and that will automatically pick my the report and the data set. This option will not be available, will not be enabled for you unless two conditions are met. One, this is a tenant setting admin, and tenant admin setting that you need to have your tenant enable in Power BI, in your Power BI tenant. It's not on by default. So if you need to, if I go to admin portal, okay, I think I'm not I think I need to be. I might not be an admin on this tenant, but your admin will see a setting that says Allow creating template content packs, and this will make this option available. But this option will not be clickable unless the content, the dashboard, the report, and the data set were created from a single Power BI desktop file that you uploaded. So you need to upload your Power BI desktop file, create a dashboard that has only reports from this single Power BI file. And if these conditions are met, then this checkbox will become enabled. You can check it and then publish the content pack. Once you do that, the content pack will show up in your My Organization content packs. So I created this content pack, called it Office 365 Insight Summit Content Pack Demo. The title and the description and the logo, all of this is not important at this point, because eventually when you submit this to us, we'll ask you to provide all these artifacts, the descriptions, the title, the screenshots, the icons. So right now, you're just testing it end to end. And basically, this is exactly the same content pack that will ship in the service content pack. So if I click on Get It Now, I will be asked to enter my tenant ID. And one important thing I missed is in the content pack, when you create it, if you would like your user to enter any parameters, then you need to create parameters alongside your query. So here I have, in Power BI Desktop, you can create parameters. There is the Manage Parameters button. And in this case, I created one parameter called tenant ID. I gave it a value. And once this is converted to a content pack, any parameters you have created here, your end user will be asked to provide. And I use this parameter in my queries when I'm connecting to the API. So I'm connecting to this is the URL of the API, and the URL expects the tenant ID, and I'm including it here as a parameter. So all my queries are parameterized. When this is converted to a content pack, the user will be asked to enter that parameter value, and all the queries will use that parameter to connect to your API. We have a lot of other content packs that do not require parameters, just authentication. Once I put my tenant ID and I click Next, I will be asked to log in, and then the content pack will be created exactly the same way as we saw in production. At this point, you are ready to submit this content pack to us. You will go to App Source. So App Source is Microsoft app gallery for multiple products. You see Power BI is one of them. There is and once you create a content pack, it will show up also in App Source in addition to inside PowerBI.com. When you go to appsource.microsoft.com, you will see a link called List on App Source. Scroll down and submit your app. And this is how you reach out to us saying, hey, I created a content pack and I'd like to convert it to an app available on your gallery. You will fill in this information, and then we'll reach out to you and we'll go over the next steps in a little bit. But this is how you submit this content pack to us. I'll switch gear to another version of the file that does use a data connector. So I have here an example of a data connector. I'm not going to go over its implementation. We'll have documentation for you. There is the session that was that happened this morning that will walk you through all the details of how you create a data connector. But in this data connector, I said my authentication is OAuth. And so you have OAuth 2.0 or API key. You define your authentication type. You define some functions to use. So in this case, I defined a simple function called ODataTree. And this is an equivalent or OData table. I think these are equivalent functions to the out-of-the-box functions that call an OData endpoint, except because it's included in that custom connector, your authentication will be triggered when you use this function instead of the out-of-the-box set of authentication available in Power BI. So because I said it's OAuth and I defined how this OAuth works specifically, if I go to Power BI and I didn't mean to do that. So if I open any of the queries, and instead of the query using the out-of-the-box OData.feed, it's using my custom function that I defined inside the extension. And because it's using my custom function that I specified in the extension, when this query runs, it will require me to authenticate with whatever authentication I defined in my connector. And that's the main reason why you would need to use a custom connector. So you'll build your file the same exact way. You'll upload that to PowerBI.com, create the dashboard on top of it. However, you will not be able to yet create a template content pack and test it successfully until you submit to us your data connector. So you can skip the test step and go to App Source, submit your application, and we will work with you on deploying your custom connector to the service first. And once that's deployed, you can test your content pack, and then you will submit that to us. Is that making sense? Any questions so far? Yeah, please.
So if you're integrating in your own kind of identity, Azure Active Directory, and wanting to switch between databases based on tenant ID, that would be a custom connector and a custom API.
So what do you mean by that? You want to access multiple data sources in the same content pack?
No, we have customers that when they would log in, we'd authenticate them and say you belong to this database over here. And that could all be done through the API.
Right. So the question is, you would like your users to connect to different databases on the back end, but at the but from the user perspective, they are just calling your API endpoint, and your API gets to decide based on the user authenticated where to get that data for that user.
Yeah. So if they're customer one and they log in, when they try to get it, that would all be the custom API, custom connector where we can control what data they have access. It's the same structure, but it's a different.
You don't necessarily need that. So you need a custom connector if your authentication is an authentication type that is not supported out of the box in Power BI Desktop. But in both cases, using a custom connector or using Power BI Desktop out of the box to connect your API, the user will be asked to authenticate. So your API endpoint now knows the identity of the user, and the user is making an API call through your content pack. Whatever data comes back will be displayed in the content pack. Your API will get to decide what data to return to that user based on the identity of that user. Is that making sense?
Yeah, my point is being control on that.
Yes, your API have full control over that because all the interaction between the end user using the content pack and your API is authenticated. And you have the identity of the user, and based on who that user is, you return the right relevant data for that user.
Yeah, because we use basic authentication, but what database tenant they can connect to is based on that.
You can ask the user to enter any parameters they would like. So in this case, we ask the user to enter a tenant ID. We have some other content packs that are tenant-based that has different URL for the API for every user. And in this case, we can ask the user to provide the URL of their tenant, and you can build your queries out of that URL that the user provided. If there is a different database that you would like to, or different property that you would like to know in your query, based on which you will decide where to get the data for this user, you can ask the user to provide that as a parameter in your content pack. And you define that logic. You write your query. You have some parameters that the user entered. You're building your API calls, and you're including the parameters in the API any way you want. You can send them as query parameters. You can include them in the actual URL. You have full control over how you implement your query using the parameters the user provided. Okay, so I'll switch back to the presentation. And like I mentioned, you go to appsource.microsoft.com, click on List on AppSource, and you submit your content pack information. And that's the first step. Once you do that, we'll reach out to you to ask for more details to make sure that you meet the requirements that we mentioned early on in the process. We'll sign an agreement with you that allows us to publish your content pack in the service, use your branding, your service name, and then eventually ask you to submit all the artifacts we need from you to do that. And these artifacts will include a link to the content pack you created, the template content pack you created and tested, the data connector if you have created one, a bunch of icons, logos, screenshots, descriptions. There is a list of artifacts that will direct you to a portal where you submit all this information to us. We'll take all that, we'll convert it to a service content pack, which is similar to the template content pack you created, except it will be available in the service gallery. We'll test it first internally. One of the artifacts we ask you is to provide a test account for us to use. And if it's all looking good, then we stage the content pack for you. We make it available in production, hidden, so it's not yet available in the gallery, but it's living in production. We give you a link that you only can use. And you can use this link to verify the end-to-end scenario of your content pack. You can give it to some of your customers to test it. And if it's all looking good, you decide when you want to go live with the content pack. You let us know, and we'll make it available in the gallery. OK, so now we've talked about the full process of creating content, a SaaS content pack. I want to mention a few things that you need to think about when you're planning to create a content pack. Like we saw early in the demo on how to use it, the user provided their parameters, the user logged in, they waited for a few minutes for the content pack to be downloaded. This waiting for a few minutes, what happens in the background is your queries that you built in the Power BI desktop are being run against your API, and the data is being retrieved. If we're talking about millions and millions of rows or gigabytes of data, so imagine the user experience will be heavily affected by that. It will be a very poor user experience. I will log in, and then I will wait for a couple of hours before my content back loads. So the size of the data is something that you really need to think about. We do have, there's a question. The question is who controls the refresh. What do you mean by that?
Like, if I as a customer, I don't own the data set.
No, so when you create a content pack as an end user, you have full control. You own the data set, the report, and the dashboard. No, you cannot download the PBIX, but the data set refresh happens in the service, and you have control over the settings for that data set. So if you go back to my Office 365 content pack that I created, if I go to my workspace data sets, I see here's my the data set that was created as part of the content pack. If I click on schedule refresh, I can control the schedule of that refresh. By default, this one is scheduled weekly, which is our only content pack that is scheduled to refresh weekly. But typically, it will be daily. And then you can add your own schedule to that. You can have it refresh multiple times a day as the end user of the content pack.
So I, as an ISV, I cannot control how many times, given the limitations of Power BI, how many times the user has to API?
No. So today you have the. So the question is, as an author of the content pack, do I get to control how many times the data is refreshed and the cadence of the refresh? The answer is no. Today, all content packs are scheduled to refresh on daily basis by default, out of the box. The user can change that configuration, make it refresh multiple times a day or certain days of the week. But out of the box, you have no control over deciding how many times a week or how many times a day this content pack would be refreshed. It's always once a day. So the question is controlling the back end, how often the back end refreshes. So from the Power BI standpoint, the data is refreshed every day, which means your OData feed is called every day. And whatever data comes back, it will replace the current data cache data set. If your OData endpoint, the data on your endpoint side has not changed, then the user will get the same data. But the refresh process will run on daily basis unless the user changes that. So there could get the same data till the data changes in the back end, but the API calls and the data refresh will happen daily. We have some hard limits in the product. It's really hard to hit because by the time you hit those limits, the user experience has already degraded so much that it just doesn't make sense at this point. So we have 1 GB data set size that you cannot exceed. If your data set exceeds that amount, the refresh will fail. Or 2-hour refresh limit, whichever happens first. So if you hit 2 hours refresh time or data retrieval time, then the content pack creation will fail. So these are things you need to keep in mind. And some of our best practices or some of the things we suggest to partners to do is, one, maybe use pre-aggregated data. So if your API endpoint allows you to retrieve pre-aggregated data that reduces the size, but still adds a lot of business value to the user, then that would then do that. In many cases, having actual row-level details is important to allow the user to drill into the data and gets exact insights on why there was the dip on that day or why there is a spike on that on that day. And for that, we suggest having a moving window of time. Instead of getting the full lifetime of the account, years and years of data, doesn't make sense to get last 30 days, the last 60 days, the last year, depending on really your use case and knowing the average account size that you have. So there is no right answer. It's try and it's so you'll have you can do experiment in Power BI Desktop on your on your API. See how long the average account takes to load and make those decisions. But keep in mind that the user experience is impacted by the size of the data, and we do have hard limits that if you hit, the content pack will just fail. Like I mentioned, there are some limitations we have today. Webhooks and direct query, AS, on-premise or service are not supported. Only REST APIs and OData feeds. Unstructured data or heavily customized, user-customized data are not supported. So you need to think of ways to have some sort of a common schema that can still add value to put in your content pack.
Are those things on your backlog, the direct query and live connection, or are they so far out that?
I wouldn't expect, yes, I don't expect them in the near future. Unstructured data is just the way the content packs today is designed does not allow for that. So that's not something that I see an improvement on soon. For that, though, data connectors are the best way to go. So now we have opened up the Power BI Desktop extensibility, and we allow you to build your data connectors that allows your users to access data from Power BI Desktop. So you can build data connectors, and the data connectors don't have this limitation. You can have any sort of unstructured data provided by your data connector in Power BI Desktop, and distribute that artifact, that connector, to your users to use in Power BI Desktop to access your API. Content packs is a template on top of that, and because it's a template, it does require this hard-coded schema that you need to provide. So you're not on your own. If you start building a Power BI SaaS content pack and you have any questions, here's an email address that you can reach out to us. If you're facing any issues or have questions early on in the process and you're not ready to submit a request to us yet, you can just email us, and we're happy to work with you to successfully build and test the content pack and eventually submit it to us. Here are some links that summarizes basically everything I mentioned today. The content pack process, documentation, the data connectors documentation, and I highly recommend going over the session that happened earlier today. And then the link that you will use to submit your content pack to us so we can reach back to you and start the publishing process. So with that, this session will be available in 2 weeks. And we'll open it for questions. Yeah, please.
So you just mentioned that, once you have this sessions or the content packs, somebody can download and they can make their own reports, right? And what do you mean? So they can publish the reports back on Power BI and it will be updated for all, or is it for them?
So the question is, I mentioned earlier that the users can customize the reports. Do they publish it back to the service? So they create a content pack, it becomes available in Power BI.com in their workspace. They can customize it, and it will become like any other content they have in their Power BI account. They can use it for their own use. They can share it with other people in the organization. They can even create an organization content pack on top of it and distribute it internally. But it will not affect the actual template that you published and available for all users. This is just in their workspace.
So just on the follow-up is, suppose we made a template, and now over time we found that there can be another report on that template. Can you update?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, we published a Power BI content pack template, and then 3 months later we have a new feature and we need to add a new report page or edit the report, you absolutely can. So the process is iterative. The same process that you will go through to publish the initial version of the content pack to us, you will go through a similar process to publish updates. And you can update the content pack at any cadence, reasonable cadence that you want.
Is there a way to offer like some kind of a trial? I've seen a few days ago the app source test drive. Is it supported in content?
So the question is, can you offer some sort of a trial? So the model really does not exist in Power BI content packs because it's either available in all content packs are available for free in the gallery for the free license of Power BI. So it's either available in the gallery for users to download or it's not. And what we do, like I mentioned, we stage the content pack for you. So we make it available in production, but hidden. It's not available in the gallery, and we give you a link for you to test. You can give this link to some of your customers to have some sort of a dry run of testing the content pack, making sure it works as you expected it, and then when you're ready to make it available publicly, we make it visible in the gallery. But is that?
So, are you familiar with the app test drive?
Matt, you wanna?
Yeah, so just a suggestion for that.
Yep. Yep.
But what I've seen is partners offering test credentials if somebody wants to go and try it out, but without their real content. The other is to make it so that the user's ID and login credentials will return their real data for a limited amount of time and then return test or sample data after that. Okay, so you base it on your side with the credentials rather than limiting at the content pack level.
So what Matt's saying is you can provide test demo account to your users on your side for them to sort of test drive the content pack before they sign up for your service, if that's something you're interested to do. Or you can have users be able to access the content pack for a limited amount of time, and then you stop allowing this user to access the API. And all of this is controlled on your API side. From the Power BI side, the user will need valid credentials to be able to access the content pack, whether it's the demo credentials or their own credentials, and your API need to respond with the data.
Any considerations for if we try to include our content pack the Visio integration or the Power Apps?
So the question is, can you integrate Visio or Power Apps? So content packs today supports all the out-of-box visualizations that you can build in Power BI Desktop, as well as any custom visualizations you can download from the custom visualization gallery. Anything that that under this set of visualizations will be supported. I'm not familiar with the Visio visualization. If it's a custom visual, then it should work, but I'm not 100%. I'm not familiar with it. Yes, please. Would you consider relaxing the rules for owning the data? It's something that we thought about. It's not right now. We still need a part of our process is to sign an agreement with the partner owning the service. But it's something that's definitely it's on our radar. Yes. The comment is, if it's an open data API, why not build content packs for third party without having to have a partnership with that application? And I agree with you. It's something definitely on our radar, but right now it's still part of our process to sign an agreement with the partner. Then reach out to me, and the question is, what about if it's a Microsoft API, and we can discuss in more details. Yeah.
Will the data connectors have the same limitation if you have your own data?
Will data connectors have the same limitations if you own the data? Data connectors is something you don't have to. You don't have to submit anything to us. You can build whatever data connector you want and distribute it to your users. It's an open platform. We have an SDK that's available for you. You can build whatever data connectors and distribute to your own users. Content packs specifically have these requirements because you submit them to us. They go through a publishing process and they show up on our service, and that's why we need to have this partnership in place. But data.
Have to support them on the
Not today. So I let Matt handle it.
When you submit to the Office Store, ultimately, of course, through the service, we're going to go through the Office Store. So part of the submission to the Office Store, there'll be an agreement that you agree to and go through. But at that point, it's clear that the data connector is a third-party connector and not owned by Microsoft. We don't have the same thing for Content Packs. Content Packs, because they're served by Microsoft, we have a different connector. So until our legal team says otherwise, that's the way.
So we're out of time. Very quick to summarize what Matt said is eventually, so content is data connections today that you don't submit them to us. Eventually, you will be able to submit those to the Office Store. And when you do that, you go through a certification process as well. Any questions? I'm here. I'll stay for a little bit. So please come up to ask questions. And thank you very much for attending.